his right knee against the Chiefs. He tore the ACL and MCL in his right knee. It'll require surgery and end his season after just 7 games. Wide receiver Deebo Samuel was limited Sunday and checked into a hospital dealing with a form of pneumonia. The Raiders have signed quarterback Desmond Ridder. The former third-round pick joins Vegas after starting quarterback Aiden O'Connell broke the thumb at his throwing hand. Lions wide receiver Jamison Williams is facing a 2-game suspension for violating the NFL's performance-enhancing substances policy. The NBA season kicks off tonight. The defending champion Celtics host the Knicks, while the Lakers are home against the Timberwolves. Monday Night Football, the Cardinals beat the Chargers 17-15. The Ravens over the Buccaneers 41-31. On Thursday night, the Rams play host to the Vikings. Bundle auto and home, renters or condo, and save with Progressive. That's the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders.
October is ending, but I want to keep the fall fun going. So I shopped Kohl's lowest prices of the season. I saved 30% on top active brands like Nike, Adidas, and Under Armour. Then I got my kids some boots for under $22. Scored 50% off Food Network baking must-haves. And earned Kohl's Cash. Yep, it doesn't get better than Kohl's. Select styles. Offers end October 27th. Coupons do not apply to Nike, Adidas, and Under Armour. See store or Kohl's.com for details.
Progressive presents good news, bad news, dumb news, and great news. Good news. Your coworker Kyle said bundling home and auto insurance with Progressive could save you money. Bad news. While saying this, Kyle was eating your clearly labeled lunch. Dumb news. Pizza near work costs $7 a slice, and it tastes like drywall covered in ketchup. Great news. You decide to see if you could save money bundling at Progressive.com and enjoy more lunches far away from Kyle. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company affiliates and other insurers not available in all states.
No way football is played in the fall and winter.
Because the hits don't hurt as much when you're numb. Get the lowdown on all the sports action coming up right here.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
Live right here on FFC, it is Football Full Circle on a Tuesday at the end of Week 7 in the National Football League, following another doubleheader to round out a week in the NFL to set the stage already with plenty of injury news and notes for a new week in the NFL on the horizon. He is Scott Wetzel. I am Ben Stevens. We are here together for the next hour up until 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Scott will look back on the 2 games on a Monday night to end out Week 7. The statement made by the Ravens on the road and the Cardinals walking it off at home in a low-scoring affair. The injuries that we saw, perhaps devastating for Tampa on Monday. In the injury news, Scott, for many teams around the NFL entering weekend number 8 on the horizon. All of that in this next hour up until 1 p.m. Eastern on FFC.
Yeah, we've had some tough weekends injury-wise over the years, NFL-wise, Ben, but I tell you what, you can't match what happened this weekend when you include Sunday's games and then last time. At Tampa Bay, losing the battle, and then maybe the war with not one but both wide receivers going out with serious look at injuries, right? I mean, this is the danger of betting futures. You know, you had a ticket on Tampa Bay, whether it's the Super Bowl or to win the division even, and your chances, if the injuries are as severe as they looked, they're probably out the window. So, but just another reminder of how brutal a sport the NFL can be.
Yeah, it is part of the sad reality, Scott. Each and every week, each and every game, each and every Sunday or Monday night slate, something is going to happen. You hope it is not gruesome as it was last night. The injuries to the insult, but for the Baltimore Ravens, make it 5 wins in a row. Scott, after a dreadful and winless 0-2 start for the flock, the Ravens have responded with 5 consecutive victories yesterday, going to Tampa in the first of our 2 Monday Night Football games in winning 41-31, covering as a 4.5-point road favorite, a total at 49.5, where we expected offense. We got a lot of points. It skies over. The Ravens have covered in all 5 victories on this 5-game win streak. And Scott, I think there is an argument to be made following Week 7, entering Week 8. Hey, listen, Kansas City is the only remaining undefeated team in the NFL at 6-0, and they own the direct bragging rights over Baltimore from last year's AFC Championship game. But at least right now, the Ravens might be the best team in the AFC.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to go there. It's tough to say they're better than Kansas City when they lost to Kansas City. But this is why we brought up last week, man. I said, why not hop on Kansas City now at 5-1 because they still had that lead. They got the head-to-head tiebreaker against Baltimore. The key was this weekend. Maybe they would have lost to San Francisco, then that kind of shrunk that lead, which is in essence really 3 since they hold the head-to-head tiebreaker. But they were able to win, and it's still plus 450. I got to see a team as great as Baltimore is playing, and boy, offensively, you couldn't have come up. They had running, they had passing, they had scrambling out of Lamar. I mean, that is just a quintessential offensive game for Baltimore. But when push comes to shove, are they going to go into Kansas City and win a playoff game, which they're going to have to reach the Super Bowl? I got to see it to believe it. I still think Kansas City at plus 450 is still a pretty good price. I mean, you get them in the Super Bowl, you're going to have a great opportunity to kind of middle that thing or hedge because they're going to be favorites in the Super Bowl over any NFC team. Maybe not big favorites, but they look good. Don't get me wrong, but I'm still, sticking with Kansas City to get to the Super Bowl out of the AFC.
Scott, we'll talk season outlook for those NFC teams and mainly the Niners who have now moved back. They are no longer the favorites in the NFC, but the two best prices to win Super Bowl 59 both hail from the same conference. It is the Chiefs as the favorites at plus 450. The Ravens now only $1 behind at plus 550. And I'm not trying to discredit what the Chiefs have done, doing it yet again, winning all 6 games, covering in 5, even with key offensive injuries, just with how things have looked. And Patrick Mahomes with a negative touchdown to interception ratio. Baltimore looks like an absolute wagon. KC is there as well. We would expect both teams to potentially meet up once again in the AFC Championship game. And based on postseason pedigree, of course, that heavily skews toward KC. But as for the game last night, Baltimore wins by double digits. Scott, it wasn't always easy. The Bucs scored on their opening offensive possession. They scored on their second offensive possession. A touchdown was called back. They settle for a field goal. The Ravens answer with a touchdown of their own. And then Tampa, driving at the end of the first quarter, looked like they had an opportunity to take a double-digit lead. Baker Mayfield throws an interception in the end zone, intercepted by Marlon Humphrey. 2 passes later from Baker, another interception following a Ravens touchdown. From that point, it was all Baltimore. The Bucs did score 21 points in the fourth quarter to only lose by 10, albeit still unable to cover the number. We will highlight all the success for the flock in the Ravens on this 5-game win streak. But Scott, in the final minute of the game, with the Buccaneers down by 10 points, a gruesome ankle injury to Chris Godwin, who has the most receptions of any player in the NFL this year, 50 through 7 games for the Bucs, but his season is now over. A dislocated ankle. He has already had surgery. His 2024 season for the Buccaneers has already come to a close.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people better saying, well, he shouldn't have been in there. Listen, you know what? I've seen crazy things happen. There was over a minute left. You need 2 scores. You could get a long pass, kick a field goal, go for the onside kick with about a minute or so left, 50 seconds left to get a Hail Mary. Is it likely? No, but is it a possibility? Yeah, and especially considering Tampa Bay had just scored the last 2 touchdowns. They were on a roll. They had scored 2 TDs in the final couple minutes. In fact, if you were laying 3.5, as I was, I'm like, if this dopey team up 41-17 with 6 minutes left doesn't cover the spread, but you were an by the way touchdown, from not covering that 3.5. So the game was still not necessarily over. So I can't say that. It's just one of those crazy plays. You get tackled that way 5,000 times. Nothing ever happens, and this is the one time it did happen. But, back to that interception. If you want to circle, where this game changed, Ben, 10-7, okay, you're not going to stop Baltimore. That interception in the red zone, in the end zone, rather. If you're Baker Mayfield, you can't throw that. You throw it to like triple covered. The guy wasn't open. Just at all. That's where it really turned for me.
And the Ravens scored just a few plays later after the first of 2 deep connections between Lamar Jackson and Rashad Bateman. And then 2 passes after that. the second pick of the night for Marlon Humphrey, who, by the way, also exited the game. The Ravens saying afterward it doesn't appear to be overly severe or significant. That is good news for a guy that has been the staple of that Baltimore secondary. Sure, Baker still threw for 370 and 3 touchdowns against a Ravens secondary that is the worst in the NFL in terms of yardage allowed, but a lot of that playing from behind. First touchdown of the night, Scott, to Mike Evans, who was battling a hamstring injury, entering and re-aggravated it early in the opening half. He is set to miss some time. He is going to have an MRI. So again, it's that injury to the insult of losing on your own home turf to falling to 4-3, and you might be without your 2 top targets, guys that have been the staple of this Buccaneers offense for 8 to 10 years. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin both could miss a considerable amount of time for the Bucs.
Yeah, it's amazing how perception is too, right? We go into the season thinking the NFC South is going to be bad. 2 weeks in, Tampa Bay's 2-0, New Orleans is 2-0, right? They just put 40 plus on the board against Dallas. You know Atlanta's going to be good, and you're thinking, hey, this is going to be a great division. Here we are 5 weeks later. Tampa Bay loses its best 2 weapons. They're in trouble. Carolina stinks. Atlanta can't fight their way out of a paper bag. So what's left in that division? It's back to being the NFC South that we kind of have been living with, Ben, for the last couple of seasons, really.
The Saints have dropped 5 in a row, of course, dealing with their own injuries at the quarterback position. The Falcons are the slight minus money favorites, Scott, at minus 165. The Bucs, along with Atlanta, the 2 teams above 500 at 4-3. The Falcons do have that direct edge at the moment because of the victory on Thursday night a few weeks ago. We'll talk more about Baltimore in just a little bit, but the nightcap of our Monday night doubleheader out in the desert between the Cardinals and the Chargers. That's next.
Ball is coming.
Don't look like an idiot at work.
Know your stuff.
Football and everything else.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
John Callis, the man Baltimore police were searching for in connection with a viral video of an assault on football fans, turned himself in on Monday. Charging documents show the viral video was the second encounter between Callis and 3 victims on October 13th. WBAL reports that 24-year-old is charged with first-degree aggravated assault and 3 counts of second-degree assault. Documents say Callis punched a victim on the left side of his head and caused them to go completely limp while falling in an unconscious state towards a nearby parked vehicle and hitting his head on the vehicle's left side door. Documents purported to show classified U.S. intelligence gathering on Israel's preparations for a potential retaliatory strike on Iran appeared on social media platforms this week. It is unclear what impact the potential leak may have on any Israeli military planning for a possible strike on Iran. On Sunday, House Speaker Mike Johnson acknowledged that there is an investigation into the possible intelligence leak.
I'm Trey Westerberg with the SportsGrid News Flash.
In business, service is everything. Cintas delivers what you need to better serve your customers. Whether it's freshly laundered work apparel for almost any job imaginable, tested and inspected fire protection systems, first aid and safety supplies, on-site AED training, or mops and restroom products, stocked and ready when you need them. Better work days happen together. So visit Cintas.com.
Oh, I'm ready!
And get ready for the workday.
Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like, to check you have a full tank of gas first before road tripping through the desert.
Empty? Seriously? Maybe I can walk.
Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds.
Maybe I can't.
You're in good hands with Allstate.
Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates, Northbrook, Illinois.
Fall is almost here.
It's time to stow the lawnmower and get ready for all that glorious action coming your way. Stay tuned to SportsGrid for all the strategies, angles, and info you need to get the winning edge. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
The nightcap of the Monday night doubleheader to end out week number 7 in the desert. and the updated outlooks the rest of the way for all four clubs that played in the two games on Monday night. To Glendale, Arizona we go. Chargers and the Cardinals. 1.5 spread in favor of the Bolts on the road, Scott. A total at 44.5 entering the Monday night doubleheader. We expected the first game in Tampa between two teams at 4-2 with a higher number at 49.5 to be a good high-scoring offensive game. It's what we got. Some looked at the second leg of our doubleheader and said, it might be a little bit less appealing visually and probably featuring less points, and that's what we saw. The Cardinals walk it off with a 32-yard field goal from Chad Ryland as the time expires. Arizona wins 17-15 to pick up its third win of the year. The Chargers, after a victory last week in Denver following its early season bye, now fall back to an even 500 at 3-3. The Cards win outright as a 1.5 underdog. Total last night, Scott, of 44.5 does stay well under.
Yeah, a couple things here, Ben. First up with Arizona since they won. Listen, was it an ugly win? Absolutely. Will they take it? Sure, but is it really an encouraging win if you're a Cardinal fan? No, it's not, Ben. You're not going to be able to win on a big-time level throwing for less than 150 yards. But when you have Kyler Murray, is he going to be able to scramble, make some plays, win some games like he did last night on that touchdown run? Yeah. And you're going to walk out of the game saying, all right, we beat a halfway decent team. The Chargers were on our way, blah, 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 blah. But in reality, you're not going to win throwing for 145 yards. He's going to stay in the league. Arizona's going to be around 500. You're going to see games where you think, okay, this team can be taken seriously. And then you're going to get clunkers because you're going to need to throw the football somewhere along the line. And I don't see Arizona being able to do that. Chargers, similar thing in that it's very clear. The MO in all three of their losses, they're 3-3. They've rushed for 61 yards or less. When they can't run the football, Ben, they can't throw the football. It's not because Herbert's not any good, obviously. They don't have the wide receivers. I mean, it sticks out like a sore thumb. 61 yards or less, including last night. You can't run the ball. They can't throw the ball. You're not going to win games.
59 yards on the ground, Scott, 2.7 yards per pop for the Bolts against a Cardinals defense that entered last night as the third worst rushing defense around the National Football League. It should have been tailor-made for Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh to control the outcome of the game and the game clock as they like to do. To your point about Kyler Murray, a $145 through the air, a touchdown, and an interception on the opening offensive possession of the game. He throws a pick, the Chargers take it away, and then a fumble that gives the ball back to Arizona on the INT return. Scott, we have talked often in the last decade about the Chargers curse, whether it was Phillip Rivers as the quarterback, Anthony Lynn, or Brandon Staley as the head coach, or now Jim Harbaugh. In weird, wacky games, the Chargers often come up on the losing end. You get a pick on the opening drive, you fumble it right back over. It even results in a punt just a couple plays later from the Cardinals. Later in the opening quarter, Justin Herbert, beautiful deep ball down the left sideline to Jalen Reagor, who is inches away from the goal line, fumbles the football for a touchback. The Chargers did not score an offensive touchdown last night. Cameron Dicker, the kicker, a perfect 5-for-5, including putting LA in front 15-14 under 2 minutes remaining, but unable to hold on for the Chargers. Arizona, agreed, Scott, not overwhelmingly impressive in terms of the outcome. They have been a good underdog, though, under Jonathan Gannon, booked as a dog 22 times in 27 games since the start of last year. Now 12-10 against the spread. This year, 3-2 ATS with 2 outright victories. The Kyler Murray has thrown for less than 215 yards, Scott, in 6 of 7 games for the Cardinals this year. Did have that 44-yard touchdown scamper last night. James Conner, a bright spot, 152 scrimmage yards, including a big pass reception on that final scoring drive that set up the Chad Ryland game-winning field goal. How about this for a stat, Scott, as we'll talk about the Chargers' outlook in just a moment. Kyler Murray, as Arizona's starting quarterback, has not won back-to-back games since 2021, weeks 6 and 7. The Cardinals have now started a win streak. They're a 3.5-point underdog against your Dolphins on Sunday in South Florida as we expect Tua Tagovailoa to return. We'll talk about Tua in just a moment, but this is going to be the Cardinals, right? 3-4, flirting with 500 if the trend of not winning 2 straight games with Kyler Murray as the QB does continue.
Yeah, it's amazing. This year, Ben, that division is there for the taking, right? With all of San Francisco's issues, Rams aren't doing anything special at this point anyway. It is definitely Seattle be halfway decent, but they should, kind of in that Arizona class. If they could just kind of get over the hump. I mean, the excuse was he never had any great wide receivers. Seemingly has one in Marvin Harrison Jr., but outside of a game or two, he really has been insignificant in that Arizona offense. And as you mentioned, they ran the ball great last night. So if you can't throw the ball when you're running great, how are you ever going to be able to throw the ball when the running game is not there? So really weird. And 2 things. We found another loophole in NFL rules, which I'll get to in a second. And then another one, which I'm not a big fan of. Key play in this game, Ben. Chargers got the football. They're driving. They get a first down. They could probably kick the game-winning field goal, final play of the game. But they don't call a penalty because the pass was uncatchable. Now, 9 times out of 10, not every time, but 9 times out of 10, a pass interference can be a defensive holding penalty as well. Defensive holding penalty doesn't matter. The ball could be up in the upper deck in the stands. It's still defensive holding. So I wonder why officials call a pass interference versus defensive holding. Because if they call the defensive holding, Chargers get a first down with 2 minutes left, and they can run out the clock, and they kick the game-winning field goal. But they don't. They say the ball's uncatchable. But, theoretically, if you have a running play to the right side and your left tackle is holding, even though he's 10 feet away, 10 yards away from the play, it's still holding. Holding is holding, right? So why on pass interference penalties do they say, well, the ball's got to be catchable? Don't like that rule.
Yeah. I think part of the criteria for defensive holding in the secondary is the ball has not been released from the quarterback's hand, where pass interference is you get there and alter the pass before it has had time to get to the receiver's hands. But I would agree, Scott, we're really kind of splitting hairs at times. The outlooks for all 4 teams in action in the Monday night doubleheader at the end of week 7, up next.
There's smart.
And there's not smart.
Not smart is hope as a strategy. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Keep it here.
And win. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. The SportsGrid Radio Network presents This Date in Sports History.
Kenny Stabler, 13 out of 18. Hasn't missed many.
1984, NFL quarterback Ken Stabler retires.
I really haven't changed much at all. The appearance may have changed a little bit. More gray hair, a little older, a little more beat up.
The Snake led the Raiders to a 13-1 record in 1976 and a Super Bowl win over the Minnesota Vikings 32-14.
Thumped them pretty good.
For SportsGrid Radio, I'm Mike DeMurgis.
The Technology Minute with George Capalbo.
North Carolina State University researchers have discovered the secret of the fastest jumping backyard bug on Earth, the tiny globular springtail. It doesn't fly, bite, or sting, but with a tiny spring-loaded fork appendage under its abdomen to avoid predators, man, can it jump! Jumping 60 times its body length and spinning at 368 RPM, it can only be seen by high-speed cameras. This may be helping possible nightmare fuel research at Cornell. They're building swarms of autonomous AI-powered 3D printed quadruped insects powered by microscopic internal combustion engines. Follow me at Capalbo on X and stay tuned to the Technology Minute for more cool stuff like this.
Money line.
The Carolina Panthers now sit at 1-6, 1-3 on the road. They are horrendous this year. David Tepper's ownership has been one of the worst in the NFL. I don't know where they go from here. Fire the general manager, just hired him. Fire the head coach, you just hired him. Get a new quarterback, you just got when you drafted him number 1 just a few short years ago. Yeah. This is a terribly run franchise with no hope right now.
Catch Money Line with Donnie Rightside and Kevin Walsh. Weekdays, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 Pacific on the SportsGrid Radio Network. Wherever you go,
there you are.
Download the SportsGrid mobile app and we'll be right there with you.
So now you can get the winning edge
anywhere. even while the wife's talking to you.
If you've got an earbud.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
So, Scott, we discussed it at the very start as we were breaking down Baltimore's success last night in Tampa. 5 consecutive wins for the Ravens. Lamar Jackson, the reigning MVP, is playing at that MVP level once again. 3 consecutive games of at least 330 total yards through the air and on the ground. In all 5 wins for the flock, the King has lived up to his name in his first year in Baltimore. Derrick Henry, at least 92 rushing yards in all 5 straight wins for the Ravens. 132 plus in 4 of the 5, including a $169 yesterday against the Bucs. We can argue about where Baltimore is in the pantheon of the AFC, but Scott, they are the hottest team in the NFL right now, winners of 5 consecutive games. What do you think the outlook is for the Ravens the rest of the way, bouncing back from that 0-2 start?
Listen, it's got to be positive, right? Weird game for Derrick Henry last night. He had 4 carries, Ben, late third quarter. Not in the third quarter, not on one drop for the entire game, late third quarter. They were showing him on the sidelines when it was off. He was not being utilized at all. They were doing those swing passes, all the time, and he wasn't in the game. And yet somehow or another, he runs for 80-plus yards for a touchdown, ends up with 15 carries. But, had they lost that game, I'm sure Harbaugh would have been asked, what are you doing? You got Derrick Henry. He literally had 4 carries late third quarter. It was a bizarre game plan. I mean, listen, it worked, right? 41 points on the board, but, it looks good when you win, but, you find a way to lose that game. Tampa Bay doesn't, completely fall apart second half, and everyone's going to be like, come on, coach, you got to, play the guy. So, but listen, they're the second best team, right? When you see Miami and all the struggles they've had, and the Jets and Cincinnati, although I'm still holding out hope, Ben, on Cincinnati. I'm going to go down with this ship, until they're officially eliminated. I just can't help but think back in the past couple of years going toe-to-toe, 1 year beating Kansas City, last year not beating them, that they might still present the biggest challenge to the Chiefs because they've shown they can beat Kansas City in the postseason as well in KC. So, but I'll put Baltimore for obvious sake. They get the much better record. But when everything is said and done, I still think it's the Bengals that'll present the biggest challenge to Kansas City, not Baltimore.
And Scott, you're not wrong in thinking that, at least to have a chance to do so. The Bengals are favored to see the postseason despite a 3-4 record in that 0-3 start after Week 7. The Ravens are the hefty favorites in the AFC North at minus 340. The Steelers are also 5-2, plus 450 price to win that divisional crown, but the Ravens certainly are moving in front. Baltimore second best price to win the AFC at plus 280, just 70 cents behind Kansas City. The Chiefs, though, the favorites and the only undefeated team left in the NFL at plus 210. And Scott, from the Ravens to the Chargers, one of the reasons the Bengals have a minus money price to see the playoffs still is because the Chargers lose last night. They're even 500. You look around the AFC at the end of 7 weeks, as we have shared the last few, there's not all that many teams with a winning record, and certainly not teams we expected to be above 500 at this moment. The Dolphins 2-4, the Jets 2-5, even the Bengals are sub 500. The Browns have 1 win. The Jaguars are struggling mightily as well. All to say, Scott, 7 teams out of the 16 in the AFC as a whole, an above 500 record at the end of 7 weeks. In 2 of those 7 teams, the Broncos and the Colts, both at 4-3 and both favored to miss the postseason at this moment. So you throw in the Bengals with a losing record. You could even include the Jets and the Dolphins somehow, some way. There is still hope, Scott, that they could turn it around in the final 2/3 of this season.
Yeah, there's hope, but realistically, in the case of the Dolphins anyway, they had everyone last year, and they were overmatched when it came to the postseason by Kansas City, right? So, a healthy Tua, playing the great, I still don't think that the Dolphin team is on that same level as Kansas City. It's funny, we kind of had the same thing last year when we talked about the AFC, especially when we were comparing it with the NFC, right? AFC is so much better with Buffalo and all the teams, right? I don't have to list them all. And what happened, a lot of those teams didn't live up to the hype. And it's the same thing again this year, whether it's the Chargers, whether it's, all the teams. I mentioned the Browns, Dolphins, Jets. Realistically, if it's not going to be Cincinnati, Baltimore, or Kansas City, if there was a bet, I would take those three versus the field.
The Chargers basically right now a pick'em price to make the playoffs, -110 to make, -110 to miss. They're 3-3. We shall see. We'll discuss a little bit further from Monday night in the injury updates you need. That's all coming your way up next.
The winning edge.
You've got it.
But not everybody has it, because not everybody listens to us.
But we're working on that.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
Progressive presents the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders. Monday Night Football, the Baltimore Ravens held off a furious Tampa Bay rally in the fourth quarter for a 41-31 victory on the road last night. Tampa led it 10-0 after the first quarter. The Ravens came back and led it 17-10 at the half. They put up 17 more in the third before the Buccaneers rallied in the fourth for a 21-7 advantage. Baltimore 5-2 with the win, 3-1 away from home. The Buccaneers dropped to 4-3, 2-2 on their home field. Baker Mayfield had 3 touchdown passes in the loss, 370 yards, 31 of 45 passing, 5 touchdowns in the win for Lamar Jackson, 17 of 22, 281 yards. One other Monday night game, the Cardinals beat the Chargers 17-15. Arizona's Chad Ryland kicked a 32-yard field goal to win it with no time left on the clock. Bundle auto and home, renters or condo, and save with Progressive. That's the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders.
Shop Macy's lowest prices of the fall today. For the season's best prices on what you need now. Save 40 to 60% on new styles to get you ready for cooler temps. Like cozy coats for your crew, the perfect sweaters for layering, and more fall wardrobe updates. Plus, don't miss amazing specials for you and your home. So good, they won't last. At Macy's.
Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like to check the propane tank on your grill first before hosting a tailgate.
Let's fire up. Here, let me try. Seriously? You didn't check the propane? Who wants chips?
Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds.
Salt and vinegar?
You're in good hands with Allstate.
Savings vary. Subject to terms, conditions, and availability. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates, Northbrook, Illinois.
Days are getting cooler.
The shadows are getting longer. You know what that means?
It's football weather. So bundle up and keep it here for all the latest strategies and gridiron information.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
So, Scott, we said it before the break. The Chargers a basic pick'em to make or miss the postseason. -110 right now on the FanDuel Sportsbook on either side. The Chargers are 3-3. All 3 losses, they have struggled to run the football, which is ingrained in their DNA. So much so, Scott, that even when their promising young quarterback, Justin Herbert, throws for nearly 350 yards and has a passer rating of 97.1, they fail to score an offensive touchdown and they lose a football game 17-15. It is not the recipe of success for this Chargers team, not this year with their offensive identity being mainly on the ground. Scott, are you buying into the Bolts at all, being able to contend for a playoff spot in the AFC?
I actually was before last night, Ben. You got to find a way to beat Arizona, right? Up and down the field they go. Nothing but field goals, though. Can't punch it in. And that's the earmark of a team that really doesn't have any, A players. Right, you can move between the 20s, but when the defense stiffens up and you don't have 40 yards for the defensive backs to have to worry about behind them, and they can play a little bit tighter on the wide receivers, you can't score, and that's average, and that's the Chargers. So playoffs, yes, because the AFC is so bad. I can't believe I'm saying that after week 7. We thought it was going to be the greatest thing in the world, but they're going to be a 500 team. So a 500 team or right around there is going to be playoff worthy come final 2-3 weeks of the NFL season. So, but serious challengers? No, I don't think they're challengers. No.
And again, Scott, we talked about the Chargers curse that has plagued this organization, either in San Diego or LA, from closing out tightly contested games. You would expect Jim Harbaugh, the disciplinarian, to have his teams organized and ready to avoid that. It did kind of catch them a little bit off guard last night. Scott, for the Cardinals and the Bucs, the two NFC teams in action, of course, we're not really going to get a true picture of what Tampa looks like without Chris Godwin and Mike Evans until we see it over the next few weeks. Unfortunate for the Buccaneers, and a huge NFC South game this upcoming weekend against the Falcons. For the Cardinals, though, Scott, the NFC West, it's not a world beater of a division right now. The Rams are getting healthier, but they've won just 2 games. The Niners were the NFC and Super Bowl favorites, but they're sub 500, 3-4. We'll talk about their injury outlook offensively in just a moment. The Seahawks have showed their blemishes, but they're 4-3, the only team in the division with a winning record. And there are the Cardinals, just a game behind as well. What's your outlook for Arizona?
Listen, they could, like I said, as we talked about earlier, I think they're going to be right around a 500 team, 8-9, 9-8. And while most years that wouldn't even come close to getting it done in the NFC West, but this year it actually might. Especially knowing San Francisco's got to play Dallas. Now they beat them pretty handily last year, but if you told me they lost to the Cowboys, I wouldn't be that surprised, right? So the Niners could, believe it or not, Ben, the Niners could be 3-5. I mean, that is wow. I didn't think they had 5 losses all year, let alone after week number 8. So it is there for the taking. If Kyler Murray can just learn to throw the football, get Marvin Harrison Jr. to be a little bit more involved in the offense. Defense has actually been halfway decent for Arizona, believe it or not, outside of a couple of games. But again, I don't. Much like the Chargers, right? Similar boat. I think they can challenge because we're really seeing a separation of state here in both leagues, AFC and NFC. You got 2 or 3 teams that are going to be really, really good. Then you're going to have 2 or 3 that are going to be, pretty good. And then it just kind of drops off a little bit. And you have so many playoff teams now that, if you can be 500, you're going to challenge for a playoff spot. I don't think they get in Arizona, but I think final month of the season, they're going to be challenging for it.
Especially if we go back and forth, which has been the calling card for those Cardinals. 3-point road underdog in Miami, week number 8. So, Scott, let's move it forward. Let's start with those San Francisco 49ers, because at the end of any week, you get some official confirmations about things that you see on Sunday or in the NFL weekend. And it's basically all bad news for the 49ers. Test confirming yesterday that Brandon Ayuk has suffered a season-ending knee injury, a torn ACL and MCL. He is out for the remainder of this year. Deebo Samuel dealing with an illness in the Super Bowl rematch on Sunday. Turns out it's not just a little bit of the sniffles. He has pneumonia. Deebo Samuel has been hospitalized with fluid in his lungs. His timeline to return, very uncertain at the moment. Christian McCaffrey hoping to return, but at least not until after the bye week, which comes up following Sunday Night Football against the Cowboys in week number 9. And just to add on to the laundry list, Scott, George Kittle dealing with a foot sprain. He's now considered day to day. It could not get much worse for San Francisco, a Niners team that is below 500.
Yeah, I mean, any Brock Purdy doubter will now have the true test, right? If Brock Purdy can overcome all these injuries and all these star players not being out and then be successful, then you have to finally admit, doubters, that, hey, you know what? Brock Purdy's pretty darn good. If he doesn't mean he's bad, but it just doesn't, it doesn't get him to that next level of, okay, you know what? We got to really, really appreciate and respect Brock Purdy for being a good quarterback. So there are a lot of people this offseason, Ben, I remember you and I talked about it, that we're down a little bit on San Francisco, and neither one of us, without putting words in your mouth, could quite understand that and come to grips with that. But I don't know if they were predicting injuries or not, but maybe, in the NFL, after 2 or 3 years, it's eventually got to come to roost. You don't stay healthy that long in the NFL. You generally somehow or another just get hit with a bunch of injuries, and they're getting it. So does this mean they can't turn it around? I don't know. I wouldn't be too encouraged about Christian McCaffrey. I mean, whatever's going on with him, this is taking a lot longer than just a little bump, little bruise, little whatever. I mean, he's going overseas trying to get, things done to help his foot out. This might just be one of those years, Ben, for San Fran, where it's, it's not going to happen. We'll just reload for next season.
For sure. Scott, the only thing that confused me about San Francisco was the fact they were placed in front of Kansas City at a few points of the offseason with a shorter price to win a Super Bowl. And it wasn't exactly rah-rah, the boys are back, we're all invested. There was all the issues with Trent Williams holding out, Brandon Ayuk holding in, looking for a new contract. Just didn't feel like an overly optimistic offseason. Did not expect all of these injuries. And you're right. Listen, I don't really think that Christian McCaffrey was the offensive player of the year last year, not demeaning what he means to this organization. But the other injuries on the outside, far more significant to me because Jordan Mason has done enough in terms of production to kind of lessen some of the blow that losing McCaffrey is. And let's not forget, Juwan Jennings was ruled out for Sunday, did not even play in that game against Kansas City. And Scott, if you are a detractor against Brock Purdy, his last 3 games have not been great. Multiple interceptions in 2 of 3. 3 touchdowns without a single touchdown, or 3 interceptions rather, without a single touchdown pass last week against the Chiefs. He has thrown multiple interceptions in 2 of the last 3 for San Francisco. Had 3 total games prior to this year with multiple interceptions. Not great for San Francisco. 4.5-point favorite still against the Cowboys on Sunday night. Scott, it's the renewal of that old NFC rivalry against the Cowboys. Good news for Dallas, who also does not enter feeling overly great about where things stand. At least they're on the road. All 3 wins on the road for the boys this year.
Yeah. In San Francisco, Ben, they're only 6-5 straight up their last 11 home games. And this comes off a streak where I forget the exact numbers, but it was something goofy. Something like 18-2 straight up and against the spread at home. I mean, they were just crushing teams left and right. But over the last year plus now, it's under 500 as well. They did beat up Dallas last year, but you got to believe that's maybe inspires Dallas that much more. I don't know. Who knows what you're getting out of this Cowboy team, right? But I don't know if I would put San Francisco, when you look at all their injuries, as an over field goal favorite in this contest. I mean, this has got field goal, to me, written all over it.
And again, Scott, for the first time this year, even after the sluggish start for San Francisco, they still remain the NFC title favorites. No longer after 7 weeks. It's the Lions in front, plus 370. The Niners, the second best price at plus 470. By the way, for the Cowboys, you got Jerry Jones saying that Mike McCarthy is designing bad plays and bad concepts on offense out in public domain. More FFC next.
Yeah, it's getting cooler.
Football weather is here.
Stay tuned for all the latest odds, strategies, and info. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
John Callis, the man Baltimore police were searching for in connection with a viral video of an assault on football fans, turned himself in on Monday. Charging documents show the viral video was the second encounter between Callis and 3 victims on October 13th. WBAL reports the 24-year-old is charged with first-degree aggravated assault and 3 counts of second-degree assault. Documents say Callis punched a victim on the left side of his head and caused them to go completely limp while falling in an unconscious state towards a nearby parked vehicle and hitting his head on the vehicle's left side door. Documents purported to show classified U.S. intelligence gathering on Israel's preparations for a potential retaliatory strike on Iran appeared on social media platforms this week. It is unclear what impact the potential leak may have on any Israeli military planning for a possible strike on Iran. On Sunday, House Speaker Mike Johnson acknowledged that there is an investigation into the possible intelligence leak.
I'm Trey Westerberg with the SportsGrid News Flash.
Wendy's breakfast burrito has an entire breakfast in every bite. Fresh cracked eggs, seasoned potatoes, American cheese, cheese sauce, and sausage or bacon. So the first bite is like fresh American cheese sauce. Bacon. And the second bite is like fresh American cheese sauce. Bacon. And the third bite, you get the idea. The boss of breakfast burritos, gotta be Wendy's.
Participating U.S. Wendy's during breakfast hours.
Home ownership. At Progressive, we know it's part of the American dream. It's sea to shining sea, and water damage as far as the eye can see. It's America. It's freshly mowed grass and a fence that was freshly vandalized by a pack of unruly teens. It's America. It's also around-the-clock protection when you bundle your home and auto with Progressive, which can help keep the American dream of home ownership alive and kicking. Get a quote at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company, affiliates, and other insurers. Not available in all states.
Ask any player and they'll tell you any advantage is important.
That's where we come in.
SportsGrid delivers gaming strategies and analysis 7 days a week.
The winning edge.
It's your advantage to more winning
more often.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
Listen, it's one of the unfortunate realities of a long NFL season, especially now as we near the midway point. Injury news starts to pile up. Hopefully some of it is optimistic and you get returns. Scott, we did hear this week, and we heard from him yesterday, Tua Tagovailoa eligible to return from injured reserve tomorrow to start practicing once again for Miami. The hope is he will be back on the practice field and ready to go for Sunday at home hosting the Cardinals. We have mentioned the spread a few times. The Dolphins, a full field goal favorite at home in the anticipation that Tua Tagovailoa will return from that scary concussion suffered week number 2 against the Buffalo Bills. Listen, a lot of people have speculated about Tagovailoa's football future. He has made the decision, along with his family and Miami's medical staff. He is ready and willing to come back. Scott, how does it impact your outlook for a Dolphins team that has started just 2-4 and is the worst scoring offense around the National Football League at this moment?
Yeah, and probably has the most overrated head coach, maybe in the history of the NFL, Ben. As a Dolphin fan, am I upset about this team? Absolutely. You know, they're going up against the second worst. It's kind of like the Chargers last night, not being able to run the ball against Arizona, which has the third worst rushing defense, right? Colts have the second worst defense in the NFL, and they not only couldn't get the ball to Tyreek Hill and Jaden Waddle, by far two best wide receivers, right? They only threw to them twice until there were 3 minutes late in the game. They had only thrown to their two best wide receivers 2 times. I mean, that is just like, hello, what are you doing on that? I don't care if it's you and me at quarterback. I'm still designing plays to get to, the ball to these guys. So I don't know what this Dolphin team is doing. I said it. They got one. I think they got one more bullet left in the chamber with Tua. I didn't think they would use it this early in the season, but if he gets another concussion, Ben, listen, no one wants the guy to have a serious injury, on the field, and that's no doubt with you. I don't doubt for a second the NFL is saying don't play, because the last thing we want is the DeMar Hamlin situation. We don't want to see some player, no matter who it is, get seriously hurt. That is bad news.
Yeah.
So if he gets hurt again, and he will, and I, as a Dolphin fan, he's not going to last the season. He can't get breathed on without getting a concussion. If you look at the majority of his concussions, he's not getting buried. Most of these just little tackles left and right. This last one, he hit his head against the guy's chest. Big deal. He's not going to last the season. So I just don't want him and his family to come out and say, well, the Dolphin doctor said it was okay to play. If it's me and it's my head, I don't care what any doctor says. I know after having 2, 3, 4, really who knows how many concussions he's really had, that I'm susceptible to this. And, I can only take so many before something serious is going to happen. So, but if he wants to play, all right, I suppose. But don't play because the doctors are saying it's safe, because it's not safe. You don't have to be a doctor to know that. It's clearly not safe for him to play.
3 documented concussions since the start of the 2022 NFL season. Scott, the peculiar and devastating things about head injury is there is still so much unknown. One of the few things that we do know for certain, once you have one concussion, it makes your chances of getting a second and a third and so on and so forth all that much more likely. You hope Tua Tagovailoa can protect himself. He was asked about wearing a Guardian cap, which we have seen in various spots throughout the NFL this year. He said he does not want to do that. It's his personal decision. It does seem like it's the personal decision made by Tua and the Tagovailoa family for him to be back. You hope he avoids any significant injuries moving forward. The odds makers still believing in Miami with Tua out there offensively. But to your point, Scott, what Mike McDaniel has done since Tua Tagovailoa's injury, despicable, disgraceful. Not in terms of how he has carried himself, but how he has coordinated in offense. He is supposed to be this boy genius, the akin of Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan and Matt LaFleur, all of his buddies that he grew up in the coaching ranks with. And yeah, the first week after that scary situation to go out there and put up 3 in Seattle with Skylar Thompson will give you a pass. But to have Snoop Huntley in your facility for nearly a month and still score at most 15 points against atrocious football teams and at least bad defenses, to be the worst scoring offense in the NFL, to give the ball to Tyreek Hill once through the air on Sunday against Indianapolis, I don't even understand it, Scott. It's not like they had 8 guys surrounding Tyreek Hill at the line of scrimmage. It makes no sense to me. You hope that Tua Tagovailoa can help with that. Again, Scott, we have said it's not like the AFC has been the gauntlet or the competitive conference that we predicted it to be. The Dolphins, sure, are 2-4, but a plus 245 playoff price. There is a little bit of hope that the Fins with Tua can turn things around.
That would be it, right? I mean, just from a gambling perspective, you think Tua's going to come back. The offense is all of a sudden going to kick it into gear. I'm sure it will. It does make you appreciate maybe Tua a little bit more when you see the backup quarterbacks be so bad. But yeah, you want to give me 2.5, considering, even at 2-4, they're realistically a game and a half, 2 games back of a playoff spot. That's actually not a bad price, but I just don't think Tua's going to last. A game, 2 games, 3 games, 4 games, but I think it's just a matter of time. He was able to last all last year, I hear people saying, but he didn't get a concussion last year. Go 2 years ago when he got a concussion, and then he got 2 or 3 of them in 1 year, as you were saying. Once you get the first one, it's that much more easier to get the second one. Fortunately for Tua, he didn't get the first one. So, but that Dolphin team is just I don't know how you explain that, Ben. You have Tyreek. I don't care if you just say, Tyreek, you know what? Go 1 yard across the line of scrimmage. We're going to throw you the football because we want you to touch the ball and just do something. They weren't even smart enough to do that. I mean, it's mind-boggling how bad that offense was with the so-called genius on the sidelines. He has really gotten exposed for it's a mean word, and I don't mean it as bad as it's going to sound, but for being a fraud. Listen, you got all that great talent in San Francisco. You and I could be an offensive coordinator for the Niners. You're not a genius from that.
And Scott, when they have been an underdog, they have been atrocious under Mike McDaniel, as we saw on Sunday in Indy. The good news is they're laying points at home with the hopeful return of Tua Tagovailoa on Sunday against Arizona. More quarterback news around the NFL comes your way up next.
The boys of summer become the champions of fall.
The World Series is on its way.
And SportsGrid brings you every angle. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. SportsGrid TV and radio networks are the premier streaming video and audio channels dedicated to serving the sports wagering audience. Found on major smart TV platforms and streaming on SportsGrid Radio and Sirius XM Channel 159. SportsGrid's real-time data, expert commentary, and entertaining analysis transform viewers into informed sports enthusiasts. Our weekday radio lineup begins with the early line at 8 a.m. Eastern with Ben Stevens and Donnie Rightside. Donnie joins Kevin Walsh on Moneyline at 11 a.m. Eastern, followed by Football Full Circle at noon Eastern. Kaplan and crew join the party at 1 p.m. Eastern, and Pharrell Coast to Coast keeps things rolling from 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern. Get in the mix with Kevin Walsh and Game Time Decisions at 6 p.m. Eastern. Evenings simmer with Carver and Lisi, then boils over with Gabe Moritzi on Sports Rage Late Night at 10 p.m. Eastern. To find out where to find SportsGrid that's best for you, go to sportsgrid.com. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
How would you like to get high-speed internet for your home for less than $2 a day? That's right. For about $50 a month, you'll get lightning-fast internet. Are you paying less than $50 a month right now for your internet? Then call Whole Home Connect right now for blazing fast internet at $50 a month with no price increases, no hidden fees, no contracts, no upfront costs, no equipment fees. It's a great deal. And guess what? You can try it for 15 days. days. If you don't like it, you get your money back. But you're gonna love it, and you're gonna love the price. Internet for your home for $50 a month. That's less than $2 a day. Plus, no contracts, no upfront costs, no equipment fees, and our 15-day guarantee. Call now. 800-797-1292. 800-797-1292. 800-797-1292. That's 800-797-1292.
Think of us as your cool roommate that has this innate gift of somehow always picking winners and never bugs you about doing the dishes or paying rent. Sports gaming strategies and information 24/7.
Get the winning edge.
This is the Sports Grid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
Scott, one of the games in week number 8 that everybody had circled from the start of the year and then got really excited by, with 2 rookie quarterbacks leading their teams to 2 winning records. It's the Commanders and the Bears on Sunday outside the nation's capital. It's the matchup of number 1 overall pick Caleb Williams and his 4-2 Bears team fresh off a bye, and number 2 overall pick Jaden Daniels and his Commanders team that is now 5-2. But Scott, unfortunately, not great news for Jaden Daniels, who of course was injured early in the opening half of Sunday's throttling of Carolina at home. A rib injury for Jaden Daniels that Dan Quinn told the media yesterday they consider week to week, but remain hopeful he could potentially play on Sunday. I'm not sure he's going to be out there for this matchup of 1 versus 2.
Yeah, and the boys in Vegas who know well before everyone else are telling you he's not playing because they get the Bears as a favorite, right? So with Marcus Mariota, then quarterback in Washington, there's no way in the world they would be a favorite. So that's too bad. You know, I mean, that would have been a built-up. They moved it to 4 o'clock. Everyone talking about how great a matchup it would have been, and it would have been. Caleb Williams now kind of holding up his end of the bargain after it was Jaden Daniels. So, but if you're Washington, you know, as great as it would be, and listen, at this point, you're realistically trying to win that division. You know, you don't want to have to play with Marcus Mariota, even though he did play very well against Carolina. I was surprised, but still, you don't want to rush the kid back, right? Why take any crazy chances? I know the same people weren't there, but we kind of lived this with Washington with RG3 just a few years ago. So I'm okay with them being conservative with him.
Yeah, the line working to Chicago, now 2.5 points. If you want to keep it under 3, that field goal in favor of the Bears, you got to pay. It's -120 worth the juice. And Scott, 2 quarterbacks playing really, really well. Jaden Daniels, a historic start to his NFL career. Caleb Williams struggling to start for the last 3 games for Chicago on this 3-game win streak. So much better, 4 touchdown tosses in London. The odds to win Offensive Rookie of the Year also moving, potentially because of Jaden Daniels missing some time and Caleb Williams playing better. Daniels now just -115 to win the award. 2 weeks ago, he was greater than a $2 odds-on favorite. Caleb Williams back to even money, +100. Quarterback injury news for the Raiders. Aiden O'Connell set to miss 4 to 6 weeks with a broken thumb on his right throwing hand. They've added Desmond Ridder, but it should be Gardner Minshew to keep getting the starts. Scott, this Raiders team in a tailspin right now. It's not going to be Minshew or Ridder, or even if O'Connell was healthy as the quarterback of the future. I expect the Raiders to have one of the 5 worst records in the NFL this year. They'll be drafting early in April in the 2025 NFL draft. I think they'll be picking their quarterback of the future come this April.
Yeah, I think they kind of made that decision when they got rid of Devontae Adams, right? So, listen, no one wants to see a quarterback get hurt, or anybody get hurt for that matter, but this might be a blessing in disguise, Ben. Rather than going 7-10 and thinking maybe it's Gardner Minshew, if it's Aiden O'Connell leading you to 7-10, then you see some hope maybe, but, really, is Aiden O'Connell going to win you a Super Bowl the next 10 years? Probably not, right? I mean, it's the old case of it's better to bottom out, suffer the lumps 1 year, go draft a quarterback, and just hope that he's the next Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels. No guarantee. Arms long list of quarterbacks taken in the top 10. That weren't any good, so it's not a guarantee. But this is the first step. So suffer through a rough year, which it figures to be, and then go draft a quarterback next season.
And more quarterback news, but not because of injury. Brian Daboll telling reporters the Giants are sticking with Daniel Jones as their starting quarterback. Scott, we saw Drew Lock come in garbage time as the Giants were getting blasted by the Eagles at home on Sunday. Are the Giants doing the right thing, continuing to stick with Danny Dimes?
Probably. He's got no money left after this year, so they don't have any ties to him after this season. They're probably going to let him go. So I guess they figure, Ben, you know what? This is it. This is your team. This is your year. Barring something crazy, an injury, whatever. And you know what? We're going to sync with you. Let's get Neighbors back. Remember, he hasn't played in a couple of games. So let's get him back. Let's get everyone healthy. Yeah. Eagles came up all fired up. All right, they laid an egg. I could still. I would have been a little surprised if they went with Locke. If it happens again this week, maybe not.
Yeah, it's not all on Daniel Jones, but it hasn't looked pretty offensively. The G-Men in primetime visiting Pittsburgh next Monday night as a hefty underdog. He is Scott Wetzel. I am Ben Stevens. That does it for us today on Football Full Circle. FFC returns tomorrow, noon Eastern time on SportsGrid Radio.
You found the advantage for gaming, odds, and more. But we call it the winning edge for short. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.